Donald Trump has often claimed Antifa, the broad, informal anti-fascist movement, was behind many protests against him and his policies. Now the president is threatening to declare the group a terrorist organisation. Posting on social media, "I am pleased to inform our many USA patriots that I am designating Antifa a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster as a major terrorist organisation." But one expert says there's a huge barrier to a ban.
The First Amendment of the Constitution creates a right of association, which allows people to both form groups and it allows people to have whatever ideas that you want. So you can't ban an organization for what they believe. You can investigate organizations to see if they've committed crimes.
Antifa is a loose affiliation of left-wing groups. It opposes extreme right-wing and racist organisations inside the US. The FBI has not considered them an organised threat, but the new director has hinted that may change.
I believe Antifa is associated with a lot of violence in this country. As to its designation, I'll leave that to the appropriate authorities.
Trump can declare foreign groups terrorist organisations, but there's no mechanism to do that domestically.
I believe that this is a concerted effort to try to chill political opposition to Trump.
Donald Trump has threatened Antifa before, but never followed through. This time, with victories against perceived enemies, he may feel emboldened.
With the MAGA gang desperately trying...
Talk show host Jimmy Kimmel was pulled off the air by his bosses at Disney after comments he made about the killing of Charlie Kirk, a close Trump ally. But he was also a frequent critic of the president. Donald Trump says it was an economic decision.
Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else.
But it's the latest in a line of Donald Trump going after opponents, including suing newspapers, banning news organizations, and calling for presenters to be sacked.
There's a pattern of actions taken that seem to be resoundingly directed at critics of the White House, of the administration, of viewpoints they believe in. And that sort of response is, to me, viewpoint discriminatory. It is targeting people you disagree with, and that is something the First Amendment does not allow.
Democrats say the decision to pull Kimmel was an attack on free speech, an example of cancel culture from a White House that promised to fight against just that.
Boom! Midnight hits, the clock strikes 12, and the U.S. government decides to do what it does best: stop functioning. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are officially in another government shutdown. But this time, it's not the usual furlough shuffle. Nope. This time, President Donald Trump has raised the stakes by threatening mass layoffs, permanent job cuts for hundreds of thousands of federal workers. Think less pause button and more delete button. Now, if you're thinking, wait, didn't this movie already come out? You're half right. Shutdowns are practically a genre in Washington, like Marvel sequels. They happen every few years, drag on longer than anyone wants, and end with a big, "we did it" moment that changes absolutely nothing. But this one's different. Instead of letting federal workers sweat it out while waiting for back pay, Trump is using the shutdown as a political wrecking ball, aiming to rewrite the very rules of government employment. Over the next 5 facts, we're going to unpack exactly how this happened, why Trump is treating government jobs like an expendable reality show cast, which agencies are on life support, what the courts are saying, and how this chaos ripples out to hit ordinary Americans. And trust me, the ripple isn't gentle. It's more like a tidal wave slamming into your paycheck, your flight schedule, and even your grocery bill. So grab a coffee, maybe a stress ball, and let's dig into the shutdown that's less about saving money and more about playing political chicken with the economy.
Boom! The lights go out in Washington, D.C., and Donald Trump just dared to pull the plug on hundreds of thousands of federal jobs. Yes, a full-blown U.S. government shutdown has begun, and now Trump is threatening mass layoffs. What just switched from political stunt to economic grenade? Stick around. I promise you'll want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. Imagine watching the world's largest democracy decide to press pause on itself, like a Netflix show you forgot to finish. That's exactly what happened at 12:01 a.m. on October 1st, 2025, when the U.S. government officially shut down. The reason? Congress did what Congress does best: argue, delay, and then fail spectacularly to pass a spending bill. This latest episode isn't just business as usual. It marks the 21st government shutdown in modern American history and the third under Donald Trump's presidency. If political dysfunction were a sport, Washington would be undefeated. Champions. Here's the gist. Republicans and Democrats had to agree on how to keep the government funded past the deadline. Republicans pushed for what they call a clean funding bill, basically just keeping the lights on without adding extra policy riders. Democrats, on the other hand, insisted on including extensions for health insurance subsidies and rolling back recent Medicaid cuts. The result? A standoff so stubborn that not even a last-minute caffeine-fueled all-nighter in Congress could break it. The Senate couldn't reach the 60-vote threshold needed to advance the spending package, which meant the federal government's wallet slammed shut at midnight. This time, though, there's an extra twist. Past shutdowns were often more about symbolic political brawls that ended with everyone slapping each other on the back weeks later. But in this one, Trump and his allies seem determined to weaponize the situation. Instead of treating the shutdown like an inconvenient pause, they're using it as an opportunity to reshape the federal workforce itself. That means we're not just talking about workers being furloughed until a deal is struck. Trump is openly threatening permanent layoffs. Suddenly, what was once political theater looks more like a demolition derby. So here's where we're at. A Congress too divided to fund the government, a president eager to prove a point by putting federal paychecks on the chopping block, and a public wondering why Washington plays chicken with the economy every few years. And trust me, this is only the opening act. But if the trigger was just Congress being Congress, the next act is where things heat up. Because this shutdown isn't about waiting in the dark. It's about who gets shown the exit permanently. And Trump's message couldn't be clearer. Furloughs are for the weak. Layoffs are for the bold. Let's talk about the mass firings that could change everything.
Traditionally, government shutdowns come with a very predictable routine. Workers get a temporary pink slip called a furlough, they go home without pay, live on ramen noodles for a while, and then when the politicians finally strike a deal, everyone gets back pay and returns to business as usual. It's painful, but it's temporary. Think of it like a snow day for adults, except instead of sledding, you spend your time calculating how many bills you can juggle before your landlord calls. But this shutdown? Oh no, this one is Trump branded, which means the script is being rewritten with a thick black marker. Instead of furloughs, Trump has threatened mass layoffs, the real permanent kind, the kind where you don't just wait for Congress to get its act together, you actually lose your job for good. Imagine being a government employee thinking, okay, I'll tighten my belt for a few weeks, only to find out that Trump wants to cut the belt entirely, and maybe even the pants while he's at it. The Office of Management and Budget, OMB, has reportedly told agencies to dust off their reduction in force plans, bureaucratic jargon for start making lists of who gets axed. And we're not talking about small numbers here. The Congressional Budget Office has warned that up to 750,000 federal workers could be directly affected, either furloughed or fired outright if this shutdown drags on long enough. That's not a snow day, that's an avalanche. Unions are already pushing back hard. The American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, and AFSCME have filed lawsuits claiming these threats violate federal law, particularly the Anti-Deficiency Act, which bars spending money that hasn't been approved by Congress. In other words, Trump can't just wave a Sharpie and erase jobs without lawmakers being involved. At least that's what the unions argue. And they've already scored a small victory. A federal judge recently ordered the administration to temporarily halt planned layoffs at Voice of America, where over 500 staffers were slated to get the boot. But here's the kicker. Trump himself is framing these firings as ideological warfare. He's pitching it as a way to get rid of Democrat things, treating government workers not as employees, but as political pawns. That makes this shutdown less about budgets and more about revenge. If you thought past shutdowns were bad, this one looks like the first step in turning layoffs into a partisan weapon. So the rules have changed. We've moved from unpaid leave to unemployment. But who exactly is getting hit? Which departments are shutting their doors, and which ones are still keeping the lights on? Spoiler, you might want to cancel that flight or double-check your food safety label because the impact is bigger than you think. Every shutdown comes with that dreaded dividing line: who's essential and who's non-essential. And if you've ever wondered how it feels to have your career stamped non-essential, just ask the hundreds of thousands of federal workers suddenly told their paychecks aren't quite necessary right now. It's like the government saying, "We love you, but not enough to pay you." Brutal. Let's start with the basics. Essential services keep going. That means Social Security checks will still hit mailboxes, Medicare and Medicaid keep running, and the military doesn't just clock out. The U.S. Postal Service, still alive and kicking because it runs on its own revenue. But everything else? Welcome to shutdown survival mode. The hardest hits land on the agencies that most people don't think about until they stop working. Take the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. Thousands of employees furloughed, leaving pollution enforcement in limbo. Or the National Institutes of Health, NIH, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. Good luck getting new research projects approved or inspections carried out. And in a world still reeling from global health threats, that's like leaving your smoke detector unplugged while cooking dinner. Air travel? Buckle your seatbelt because the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, is preparing to furlough around 11,000 workers. Air traffic controllers and TSA agents are still required to show up, but without pay. Picture guiding planes through stormy skies while worrying about your rent check. If that doesn't make you a little nervous about flying, nothing will. Then there's education. The Department of Education, which already had its workforce slashed earlier this year under Trump, is now cutting deeper. Many federal student aid services and grant programs are at risk of grinding to a halt. Parents and students who rely on that support left hanging. But here's the kicker. Some agencies actually get to keep employees working for one specific reason: to process firings. Yes, even as whole departments freeze, the bureaucrats who carry out reduction in force plans are deemed essential. Translation, the layoff machine keeps running even if the agency is technically shut. You couldn't script irony sharper than that. And let's not forget oversight. Earlier this year, Trump gutted many inspectors general, the watchdogs who keep agencies honest. So even in this chaos, fewer people are around to sound the alarm if cuts are misused or weaponized. It's a perfect storm. Layoffs in motion, oversight on mute, and workers stuck between being unpaid or unemployed. So we know who's in the firing line. But here's the million-dollar question. Is any of this even legal? Or is the White House playing fast and loose with the rules while daring the courts to stop them? Let's talk lawsuits, judges, and the messy legal chessboard. When the government shuts down, chaos usually follows. But this time, it's not just chaos, it's legal warfare. The Trump administration's threats of mass layoffs have sparked a constitutional showdown, and unions are dragging the fight straight to the courts. It's like watching a high-stakes chess game, except the pieces are real people's jobs, and the board is on fire. Here's the legal crux, the Anti-Deficiency Act. This law has been around since the 19th century and basically says no money, no spending. Federal agencies aren't allowed to spend or obligate funds without Congress signing off. And that's exactly what unions argue is happening here. By ordering agencies to draft permanent layoff plans during a funding lapse, Trump's team is accused of skating dangerously close to breaking the law. It's the bureaucratic equivalent of trying to buy dinner with a canceled credit card. The American Federation of Government Employees, or AFGE, and AFSCME unions filed lawsuits blasting the administration's directives as arbitrary, capricious, and unlawful. That's lawyer speak for you're not the king. You can't just fire people at will. And guess what? The unions are already scoring points. A federal judge stepped in and blocked layoffs at Voice of America, where more than 500 journalists and staff were about to be cut loose. For now, those jobs are safe, but it sets up a much bigger question. Does the executive branch even have the power to make permanent federal layoffs without Congress? That ruling could reshape the boundaries of presidential authority. Meanwhile, Trump isn't exactly hiding his motives. He's framing the layoffs as a purge of what he calls Democrat-controlled programs, pitching it as part of his broader crusade to shrink what he sees as a bloated partisan bureaucracy. In Trump's world, it's less about saving money and more about flexing muscle. That makes the lawsuits more than just legal technicalities. They're battles over the very soul of the federal workforce. On the political side, both parties are digging trenches. Democrats are blasting the shutdown as a reckless stunt, arguing that Trump is holding federal workers hostage to score ideological points. Republicans are trying to spin it as tough love for an oversized government, insisting the cuts are necessary. But make no mistake, neither party is backing down, and every court ruling could tip the balance. So here's the picture. Workers stuck in limbo, judges stepping in like referees, unions sharpening their legal swords, and Trump treating the shutdown as a tool of political leverage. The Constitution is suddenly less of a rule book and more of a tug-of-war rope, and in that rope pull, federal employees are the ones getting whiplash. We've seen the shutdown's cause, the layoff threats, the agency's hit, and the courtroom drama. But the final act is the big one. How does this mess ripple out into the real economy? From your morning flight to your grocery bill, let's talk fallout. Shutdowns might sound like political theater until you realize they sneak right into your daily life like an uninvited guest raiding your fridge. This one, it's more like that guest smashing the fridge door on their way out. The ripple effects of a shutdown, especially one spiced up with Trump's mass layoff threats, spread fast, far, and painfully. Let's start with the obvious. Federal workers. Hundreds of thousands are either furloughed or showing up to work without pay. That means government employees across the country are suddenly tightening belts, skipping dinners out, and juggling overdue bills. Sure, Congress usually approves back pay later, but try telling a landlord or a daycare provider that your paycheck is just temporarily political. Families living paycheck to paycheck can't exactly float months of expenses while lawmakers bicker. Then there's the bigger consumer economy. When so many people stop spending at once, restaurants, shops, and service businesses near government offices feel the squeeze. Picture whole downtowns, usually buzzing with federal staffers on lunch breaks, suddenly going quiet. Small businesses that rely on steady foot traffic are left in survival mode. Air travel takes another hit. With FAA employees furloughed and TSA officers working unpaid, expect longer lines, slower security, and more flight delays. Airlines have warned that a prolonged shutdown could cost the industry up to $1 billion a week. Travelers don't just get cranky, they cancel trips, which spirals into lost revenue for hotels, restaurants, and tourism hubs. That's not politics, that's your holiday plans going up in smoke. And what about small businesses looking for federal support? Forget about it. The Small Business Administration shuts down loan approvals, choking off credit for entrepreneurs. Farmers and ranchers waiting for USDA programs put on ice. Families relying on nutrition assistance like WIC could see benefits dry up almost immediately. It's like the safety net suddenly tearing just when people need it most. Longer term, the consequences grow even scarier. Credit markets start watching Washington nervously. If shutdowns become the template for layoffs, markets might price in more instability every time a spending fight looms. That means higher borrowing costs, jittery investors, and a U.S. economy dragged down not by recession or global crises, but by political self-sabotage. It's like shooting holes in your own boat while you're still at sea. So let's be blunt. This isn't just about Trump versus Democrats or Washington gridlock as usual. This is about whether government shutdowns evolve from annoying interruptions into structural resets, with mass layoffs as the new normal. If that happens, millions of households, entire industries, and even the global economy will start bracing every time the budget clock ticks down. And that's not politics anymore.
That's instability baked right into the system. And there you have it. 5 facts that take us from midnight shutdown drama to the kitchen tables of ordinary Americans. But before we close, let's talk about what this all means going forward and why staying plugged into stories like this is more important than ever.
And there it is. 5 big facts that take us from midnight shutdown theatrics all the way to the dinner tables of millions of Americans who now find themselves caught in the crossfire. We've seen Congress fail to keep the lights on, Trump push for mass layoffs instead of temporary furloughs, federal agencies grinding to a halt, lawsuits flying across courtrooms, and an economy starting to twitch nervously as this drags on. The bottom line? This isn't just a shutdown. It's a stress test for workers, for the courts, and for the economy itself. If Trump succeeds in normalizing layoffs as part of shutdowns, we might be looking at a future where every budget standoff comes with the threat of mass unemployment. That's not just political drama, that's economic Russian roulette. But here's where you come in, because while Washington keeps us on this roller coaster, your voice matters in keeping the spotlight on what's at stake. So hit that subscribe button, ring the bell so you don't miss updates, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Trump's shutdown gamble is strategy or sabotage? Which agency do you think feels the pain most? Let's get a real debate going, because ignoring it won't make the shutdown disappear. This is Global Pulse News. Bold, sharp, and always watching the power plays. Stay tuned, stay skeptical, and whatever you do, don't let the shutdown shut you out.